you for inviting me. I'll be here today, and I'll stick around most of the day tomorrow. My general MO for things like this is when I get a chance, when I get some of the few invitations that people actually want me to come, I try to stick around for a couple of days because I really want to listen. If you're really blessed, this will be the last time you hear my voice for more than a minute at a time. So I'm going to come to sessions. I can't stay for awards tomorrow night, but I do want to hear more. And thanks, Roger, for all the good work you do and your staff do. And if I want to get my paycheck, I also acknowledge the leadership and tremendous energy of Paul Dole, who's on the partnership board. And, thanks, Paul, for all you do. I don't know if you know how much energy Paul puts into this, but our board at the partnership works really, really hard, and Paul's just a demon. I know you can believe that part. As long as the ducks are flowing down the river, Paul will be there. Let me also thank George Sheldon for his kind words and also for being here. I would echo what he said, and also what Roger said. We're really glad you're here. I might use the word spirited discussions rather than contentious, but you're the attorney, I'm the flunky, so I'll just follow the lead here. We really do have a good partnership in these very, very tough times. And I know some people get into hesitancies or maybe old news about, well, they're the feds and we're the local agency and we're the advocates and they're the government and they're the bureaucrats and we're the do-gooders or whatever. But let me assure you, and I know that most of you know this already, the challenges we face in the next 4 months, George Sheldon is not our problem. George Sheldon is our friend. Jeannie Chafin is not our problem. Jeannie Chafin is our friend. And the Obama administration, for all their machinations and kabuki dances about funding levels, cares about people we care about. But we've got some other issues that are pretty challenging, and I'll touch on those. I'd like to do 2, maybe 3 things. I want to do the number stuff because I'm from Washington and I'm supposed to have numbers, and I know everybody here wants statistics, but there's no PowerPoint. There's no handout. The trees are safe, so is the screen. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the numbers around poverty, but we all know that stuff already, but more recently, the wealth gap and the income gap. Denise, would you go to my bag there? There's a copy of Promise Magazine. Would you pull that out and just be so kind as to walk it up to me? So I'd like to talk about that and what that means for community action and why it's so important. I'd like to segue from that about messaging, how we talk about what we do and how effective it is, and then just wrap up with maybe some of the examples of the kind of threats that are really there that we're facing. Okay, so let's do the numbers first. Thanks, Denise. She's simply wonderful. So we all saw the poverty numbers when they came out in the census, and it was the highest number of poor people ever. 15.1%, not the highest percentage, but the highest number of poor people, 46.2 million Americans poor, 2010 census. And that's when the hunger numbers came out, and the term that was generated during the Bush administration was food insecurity. The politics at the time said we can't talk about hungry people. For God's sakes, this is America. We don't want to sound like some late night public service ad. Third world country of feeding pets. So we say food insecurity rather than hunger, but I think we all know what it means, and that means that people are not sure where their next meal comes from. And the response to that is food stamps, now SNAP, and we know that 1 of every 6 Americans now receives SNAP. 1 of every 6 Americans receives SNAP. And if you're an African-American kid, chances of you getting on SNAP food stamps between the age of 1 and 18, 80%. 80% of all young African-American kids and their families will be on food stamps. So that was pretty crazy. And I looked at the Kentucky numbers on the way over, and one number, they're pretty much with the national standards in terms of unemployment rate. Your last unemployment rate is at 8.3%, which is about the national average. But one number I always look at with this census numbers, and you can always pull this stuff up, and they update it a lot in terms of food stamps and what have you. That's www.census.gov. If you're writing a proposal, it's a great number to have. But one number I always look for is poverty for female single-headed households, because it really jumps up. I come from a moderately affluent county in Maryland, north of Baltimore, and the school dropout rate's about 3%, the poverty rate's about 7%, because we have a lot of military and all that stuff there. But the poverty for single moms in Harford County, Maryland, is 40%. And the poverty in Kentucky, for the last time I looked, was 38.1%. So sometimes we get charged with, well, there's just pockets of poverty, these people aren't really poor, they've got telephones, they've got refrigerators, they've got cell phones, they've got a computer. Like, this is the top of the proverbial mountain. These things are pretty much general. But the poverty rate for the single moms in Kentucky is 38%. And then just back to the national stat, some of you know that this was the first year they did the new census numbers called the supplemental poverty rate. And what that did was taking the benefits from SNAP, from food stamps, from housing, from medical benefits, and they said, well, we'll factor all this in, and then we'll see what the real poverty rate was. And that raised the poverty rate to 16%. And for senior citizens, older people like me, geezers unite, the health care cost into that formula was even worse. The poverty rate for older persons grew even more. But what's happened recently, I think, is even more drastic, and it's important for community action. I just want to spout numbers, but it's something I think we really need to focus on and understand, and I'll tie this all together at the end, I promise, is the wealth gap. And some of you may have seen our Promise magazine, the wealth gap. If you don't, have a couple extra issues with me. But the wealth gap, basically, as you would suspect that term implies, is the gap in money and wealth and assets and resources between the people at the top and the people at the bottom of society. So what is it? Okay, here's one. This will get you a free drink at Paul Dole's favorite bar of choice for impress your relatives at Thanksgiving dinner. The top 400 Americans have more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. Yep. 400 people have more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. In terms of CEO salaries, the difference is the CEO, the differential, CEOs make 270 times more than their workers. There's a gap here. And in fact, the top 1% of the income level controls 40% of their wealth. And you can say, well, what's wrong with that? You know, it's okay, those people worked hard, they were born into the right families, they managed the money, they took risks, they did that. What difference does it make, and is it bad? We know the gap is real. Is it bad? Why do we care? And what difference does it make? And shadowing back to George's earlier remarks about data, we're now in the very extended, very public, will escalate even more during the campaign debate. What does economic inequality mean, and is it good or bad for society? This book is called The Spirit Level, and I'm not going to do a third grade book report for you, and I've got another one here, but this is one side of the argument. It's called The Spirit Level. It's by two physicians, Richard Wilkinson and Kate Pickett, two MDs. And they looked at 30 years worth of data on income levels, health sufficiency, social mobility, community cohesiveness, and it's really a pretty rigorous piece. And they found out what makes an effective, successful society, a country, is not the wealth of the country. It's not the resources within that country. It's not even the common culture of the country. What makes a country successful and effective and equitable and promising for young people social mobility is the amount of economic equality in there. And for countries that don't have that, where there's a wide disparity, like I'm talking about, the 400 versus 150 million, health services are bad for everybody. Income achievement is bad for everybody. Social mobility is bad for everybody. Education attainment and quality is bad for everybody. And there's a list of about 20-some indicators that they go down, and the subtitle of this book is Why Greater Equality Makes Society Stronger. And Peter Edelman. He chaired our Rooting Out Poverty group with the partnership, and he just did a book came out this week called So Rich, So Poor that makes the same point. And there's a bunch of other books about economic inequality coming out, because the danger is that young people, whether they have college degrees or whether they're high school dropouts, can't find work, can't find jobs, can't access society. And while some people assert that they've got to work harder and do this, the inequality gap almost makes that impossible. Now, I would classify this, I'm going to use the right technical term here, and if anybody knows, just let me know. I call these people the good guys, spirit level, that inequality is bad and hurtful. And from parts unknown, weight unknown, the bad guys. This is just out this week. This is a book called Unintended Consequences. Why Everything You've Been Told About the Economy is Wrong. It's by a guy named Edward Kennard. If you're see, I don't have a life. I have no life, so I watch cable. So this is what I do when I watch cable. I see the books. But Kennard is on TV a lot, and he's going to be in TV a lot, talking about that inequality is really good. Because why it's good is that people that take risk, where that selfish bad man, Warren Buffett, donates his money to charity, the return for society is $5 for every dollar that Buffett donates. If he was really a cutthroat venture capitalist and invested that in risk-taking endeavors, it would be a $20 to 1 return. And Kennard, who's a thoughtful guy, he's probably a billionaire by now, retired at the age of 50, used to work for Bain, the AIN. Please hold your applause. Says is that the inequality is good because it stimulates jobs and creates things, and we need more risk takers and less, and I apologize if there are any art history majors in the room or former art history majors, but what society needs more of is more risk takers with venture capitalists and less art history majors. And that's his term. And he makes the case that job creators happen because of this wealth inequality. It's actually good for society, and that's the way we need to go. And as you might expect, there's a certain political camp that's finding Kennard's unintended consequences very appealing, and there are other people that do the Woodstock Old Time Radio Hour, Lexington, tree huggers, and all that stuff that are more inclined to think inequality is bad. Here's the deal. Some people say that the rich folks, the top 1%, are the job creators. That their money creates the investment, and that's why the Ryan budget, which proposes $150,000 tax refund for every millionaire, should be passed. And that should happen because that wealth will trickle down and create more investment, more jobs, and more factory, and create certainty. The other side says, that's not really true. And there's a lot of millionaires. The fellow who founded Amazon Publishing says, venture capital doesn't create millionaires. The middle class creates millionaires. The middle class, this isn't a problem of concentrated wealth in the top. This is the fact that the middle class, us, are people that spend money. And Warren Buffett can't buy enough t-shirts and enough cars and enough restaurant meals and enough books and enough other things to lift the economy up. But a strong, vibrant, healthy, non-shrinking middle class can do that. And if we're really interested in making America better, what we need to do is invest and do things to grow the middle class, like Pell Grants, like other, like the transportation bill for infrastructure, like CSBG, like Head Start that starts early, make that kind of investment so that this society. My good friend Jeff Birch just walked in. I feel blessed already.
Yeah, point me up.
He's been here 5 minutes. He hasn't given me a please donate card yet. Jack, I didn't recognize you. What we need to do is just grow the middle class, and that's what community action does. So the point of my message is, a lot of us have been thinking, I think, for a long time, and I started with community action back in '73 as a volunteer. Head Start, and a board chair and all that stuff. We know really well that what we do helps low-income people. We got that. What we do is help poor people, low-income people, and vulnerable people. What the new argument is not only what we do good for low-income people in the neighborhood, it's good for middle-class people in the neighborhood. We're the ones that grow the middle class. It's good for rich people. In fact, the work that CSBG does lifts all society. And this may seem like an abstract debate for you, and I hope it's not, because it's going to get a lot of play, both politically in debates and in the media and in foundations and in funding sources and probably even in Congress, that what kind of society we want. And I think we have to be proud of the fact that community action helps grow the middle class. When we say it lifts people out of poverty, that's what it does. And where do they go when they're lifted out of poverty? They hopefully climb up the economic security ladder and become more middle class, and we need to do that. So that's a mantra I think we need to do. Now, how do we tell the story? We now get to the wonderful world of messaging. George Sheldon talked about some of the discussions about standards and his experience with law school accreditation and other kinds of pieces. But one of the barriers I think we need to overcome, and this isn't directly to George, it's other people who work maybe at other federal agencies, that maybe don't understand what the community service block grant is, because there's a tendency for some folks to say, okay, this is a federal program, so the federal program, you know, in Lexington is the same as the federal program in LA, is the same as the CSBG program in Massachusetts, is the same as a rural program in Arkansas, is the same as an LUT program in Alaska, and that's not true, because we all know that every community action agency is different. So some of the people that are some of the most strident critics or questioners about what we do and what you do say, well, tell me what the payoff is. What's the result of community action? What does a CSBG dollar buy? And they're looking for some kind of uniformity across agencies to say, okay, well, you got this number of widgets or this number of outcomes or this number of successes. And one of the strategies in some of the talks that we've had that George referred to, as well as some of the talks with OMB and other people, the Senate Budget Committee, is to help them understand that what you all do is use your CSBG money in ways that fit your community. You do a needs assessment. What can you have? What can you match? What can you do? And what CSBG is, in a very corporate capitalist kind of term, is your venture capital. It's what holds you together.